These tiny Marabou Jigs are the best crappie lure. In today's video, I'm going to explain exactly why I think this is such an effective method to target these crappies. Let's get fishing. He's coming right towards it. Got him. That was sick. Oh my God. Welcome back everybody to Ben Stone Fishing. I'm Ben Stone and I of course am fishing. Today I am targeting pre-spawn crappies. For those in Minnesota, you know we've had a long drawn out winter and that's really thrown a lot of these lakes off. So we're quite a few weeks behind, but we're finally starting to see some of these fish push up into the shallows after a very long cold winter. They're big, they're fat, they're hungry, so we are going to be targeting them with these tiny Marabou Jigs. And the reason why these are so effective, well, I'll prove it in the video, but it's the Marabou. It makes these jigs have a very long hang time, which provides a lot of time for these fish to actually eat. A lot of the time I'm sight fishing these fish, so having a bait that has a lot of hang time allows a long time for these fish to get a chance to eat it. So we're gonna get up on the school of fish that I just marked and get fishing. So right now I'm moving in on the school of crappies they're all getting ready to come up here and bed. And that's really important because location is gonna be key when you're doing this. I'm at a very shallow flat that's kind of on its own bay out of the main lake. This is the type of stuff that's going to warm up the fastest, which is where these fish are going to start holding soon after that ice comes out. So I marked a school of fish earlier and I spooked them all, which is fine. If you spook the fish, it's not over. Just kind of fall back off the spot, give them time to reset, and we're going to move in here and slay a couple of big crappies and show you why this Marabou jig is so effective. Here's one. Not a giant, but it's nice. We finally just found this school that I marked earlier. They moved down the shoreline just a little bit. Not a giant by any means. I saw just a couple of them. That Marabou jig was just kind of gliding with the wind by the surface, and that guy crushed it. There's bigger fish in that school. It's probably one of the smaller ones. We're gonna get right back on them, but it's good to be back out in open water catching fish again. Now location is very key early in the season like this. You want to search for shallow bays, ideally with sand or reeds, because that's ideal spawning habitat for these crappies. And in my case, I'm in a very shallow, weedy bay with a little bit of sand and a little bit of reeds in this corner. This is the only spot with reeds in this entire bay, and all of the fish are congregated right on the outside. There's actually a couple of fish up on the reeds. These fish are probably only a day or two after full on pushing up into those reeds to bed. It provides a more unique opportunity when they're on the outside. In my opinion, they're a lot easier to catch too because you're not battling those reeds. So like I said, this Marabou jig is key. There's a little bit of a breeze today, so when my line hits the water, that wind just kind of carries that Marabou jig higher up in the water column. These fish come up off the bottom and crush it just like that one did. There's big fish in the school, so I'm gonna get back to fishing and put a couple more in the net here. There's another one. It's a whole bunch of fish sitting right here. A little bit of a smaller one, but there's a whole bunch of them. And actually, as I speak, I think these fish are actually pushing up into the reeds, because that one came right out of the reeds. There's a cluster, about 5 others in there. Not a giant. I know there's giants in here. That's kind of the goal right now, is to get one of these bigger ones. A couple of big ones chasing it right now. This one's gonna crush it. He's coming for it. Got him. That was so sick. That's why the hang time on these Marabou jigs is so important. Marabou jig down the hatch gave that fish so much time to swim out of those reeds, come out and crush it. So much fun watching these crappies eat, especially when you're watching that jig just barely flutter down and then these guys come out and crush it. That is a total blast. Crappie sitting right there. Watch this jig drop right in front of him. A couple of crappies there. That was sick. Didn't even see that one. Didn't even see that one. There's 3 fish down there. Jig was just falling nice and slow. We got a little crappie. So these particular jigs I got from Cabela's and Bass Pro. They sell them in like a 6-pack. They're really cheap, but the one thing about them is they make them all the way down to a 1/100th of an ounce. So this is a very lightweight jig. I also like using a brighter color. I'm not a color guy. I don't really think color matters. The reason why I'm using a brighter color though is simply so I can see it in the water. The second I see that green disappear, I know I gotta set the hook because there's a crappie on the line. So we're gonna catch a couple more, and then we're gonna take a break for the evening, and then we're gonna come back out here and do something else. Not sure what yet though, but let's catch a couple more fish and hammer this thing out. There's a better fish. Literally as I speak, these fish are pushing up into the reeds, which is pretty sweet. Another beautiful crappie. So much fun. Big one right there. Absolutely engulfed that marabou. He was hanging up in the reeds. That's more of what I'm after. Look at how wide that fish is. Getting ready to spawn, so we're gonna get this fish right back in the water. If you guys haven't used a marabou jig yet for spring crappies, you're missing out, or really just in general. I mean, just throw the marabou jigs. A lot of fun to use, especially when you're sight fishing. They work great for carp too, don't forget that. So we'll get this fish back in the water. Just a fun evening to be back out on the lakes, chasing panfish in open water. Now when it comes to extra gear for replicating this bite, I believe that the setup is pretty important. So I have two setups that I'm running. Of course, you can always get away with one, but this just makes things a little bit easier for me if I want to switch things up a little bit. But I'm running the 7-foot panfish series by St. Croix in a light. And this rod loads up so well on these fish, which is extremely important, especially when crappie fishing, because crappies have a much more weak mouth. So they're a lot easier to get off. You don't want something that's too snappy where you're gonna rip that lure right out of their mouth. So the nice moderate action on this is great. I've got one set up for casting with that 1/64th ounce jig. And then I've got a 1,000 size reel on here with 5-pound Suffix nano braid. This stuff is incredible for casting. Even though I'm running that really tiny jig, I can still cast this jig quite a distance. And the other setup I have is my really light setup. So when I'm getting up into the really skinny stuff with these fish pushing up in here, this is my go-to rod. So this jig is much more like a fly, so it's very tricky to cast. So with that, we've got a little fill bobber on there just to give me some distance out there. And also this allows that jig to hang up just a little higher instead of just sinking down or getting carried with the wind. You know, like I said, I'll have links for these marabou jigs in the description, but I got them from Bass Pro and Cabela's. I stocked up. I've got a bunch of them here just for every sort of application. I've got them 1/100th of an ounce to 1/32nd of an ounce. They're all great. They get the job done. The nice thing about them, like I said, is the hang time, small hooks so you can get into the bluegills too. But if you guys don't spend a lot of time pan fishing, this is something you need to try because this is one of my absolute favorite things to do before muskies open up. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but there's actually crappies everywhere in these reeds. And I'm just trying to find one that I want to catch, looking for a bigger one. They're everywhere. They're all out here too. Really thick cover, really tricky to catch these fish when they're in this kind of stuff. But this is exactly why, right here, this is why I love marabou jigs. Oh, I didn't want that one. There's a, oh, that's a big one. I just spooked them all. Of course I did. All right, there's a whole bunch of crappies out this way. There's some really big fish in the school. I see a really big one that I want though. He's coming right towards it. Got him. That was sick. Oh my God. That's a good fish too. That's the one I wanted. Watching that marabou jig fall right into these fish's mouths never gets old. If you guys haven't tried this yet, you are missing out because this is some of the most fun to be had before you can walleye, pike, musky fish, you name it. There's something special about dropping these marabou jigs on these big crappies and just having a blast. Great way to catch fish for the pan too, but we'll get this guy back. Thank you guys for watching and I'll see you next week.